I'm going to bash NLP again. Actually, I'm not. Because I never do. I'm going to bash the applications of NLP that some idiots seem to think is a good thing, if that makes any sense whatsoever. But NLP cancer cure, that's what I typed into Google today. I know, too much free time. I've got better things to do, I'm sure of it. Like, actually, I've got to do the vacuuming, which I'll be doing after making this video. NLP cancer cure. There are loads. Just type it into Google, type it into YouTube, and see just how many people have put that either into their tags in order to grab the search returns on that, or in fact are claiming it directly. We all know who I'm talking about. Well, just Google those words and you'll see. Now, they seem to operate from a common delusion, which is essentially this, that when things go wrong in the body, the unconscious mind is making bad choices. And that when we hypnotize the person, we can give them suggestions that amazingly make the unconscious mind make better choices. They'll justify this by saying things like, well, if you have a really bad diet, if you have too much alcohol and you choose to smoke, that is your unconscious mind making bad choices. And therefore, if we can get you to make better choices, your health will improve. Well, obviously, if you quit bad lifestyle and live a healthier lifestyle, there's a strong possibility, but by far from being guaranteed, that your health will improve. I mean, we all know that guy who's drank and smoked and lived to 100. I mean, I know one of those, but he's never been ill. And we also know there's people who keep fit, they only ever eat wholesome, green, leafy food, and then they die of some horrible internal disease when they're 35. I've known a couple of those too. So there's always exceptions to the rule, but generally, the healthier we try and live, generally, the healthier we're going to be. But just because people make bad choices, for whatever reasons, doesn't mean that when we hypnotize a person, we can persuade somehow their unconscious mind to make different choices at an endocrinological, cellular, biological level. And yet that's what's claimed. I'm going to read you something from somebody's website. I shan't name who. Let's just say, I won't. So let's just find it. The nervous system acts like a messenger within our body-mind, receiving and processing messages from the outside world and passing the messages to other systems within the body-mind, e.g. immune system, endocrine system, and lymph system. I think that's supposed to be lymphatic. Harmony within the systems mentioned, mediated by the messenger, nervous system, will promote good health and well-being. For the purpose of this work, we make an illusionary split between different forms of consciousness. There is the conscious mind, which represents our moment-to-moment explicit attention, and the unconscious mind, which represents everything in our system we're not conscious of or can consciously influence. Blah, 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 blah. Scroll it down. When there is a problem in the body, the unconscious mind sends a signal via the nervous system. The signal is frequently experienced as pain or some other physical response. The simple example is if you ate a very heavy lunch excessively, your digestive system will signal through indigestion that it is struggling to break down the food that you have consumed. Chemical shifts in our body through stress and also diet could create an ulcer, and that ulcer is the unconscious mind's way of saying change something. The above logic can be followed through to more serious issues such as cancer or heart disease. With cancer, the immune system is having a challenge in combating the acceleration of cancerous cells in the body, and a tumor is the signal of the shift. With heart disease, what we consume is an influence and also how we live in relation to stress, which has no, and it goes on and on and on. So essentially, disease, a pain, a symptom, is the unconscious mind's signal. It is the nervous system signal. Now, this is a motif, and whatever the word is, actually is probably a better word than that. Which a trope. That's the one I wanted to say. It's a trope that's very, very common across multiple alphabet therapy disciplines, where essentially people are engaged in this act of trying to heal diseases. Now, quackery of this sort has been around ever since there's been people who've had diseases. I mean, quacks. It's easy to make money off the poor, the needy, and the desperate, especially when people have got diseases that the world of medicine, as good as it is and as faulted as it is, let's admit it's not perfect. There's by a long shot, cannot do anything about, and they are still basically practicing on people to find out how best to treat certain things. When people are in that situation where the medical world is going to fail them for whatever reason, people will be desperate and will pretty much employ anything. Now, along the way, lots of those people continue to have medical treatment. They also investigate all the alternatives. They will find alternative treatments that actually they quite like. It favors their own operating metaphor for how they perceive healing to take place. They find a healing modality that actually matches that. And some of those people will recover. Because in any population of diseased people or ill people, a significant percentage are going to recover. Some of those people will have been given the impression directly or indirectly that they're incurable. And some of those people will have received communication from their treatment professionals, their physicians, their surgeons, their nurses, whoever it is, that will have indicated basically it's not looking good. And that you're likely to die. And of course, then people always want to know, well, how long is it going to, how long have I got, doctor? How long have I got? Understandable. Now, of course, no one can really say that, but they'll say, well, generically, patients with this condition, we find that they tend to live for X, Y, Z length of time. And then some of those patients actually will recover anyway and go on to live very well. The attribution is often made to the alternative therapy they preferred. And often they will go on to, or some of them, not all of them, will go on to train in that and then say, well, I had a brain tumour. There's quite a few of those in the NLP world. I had a brain tumour, and only through the power of this alphabet therapy was I saved because the doctors gave up on me. That's not really how it works in medicine. But, everyone has their story, and some of these stories take on some very, very common themes. And this is something that years back I was very interested in, things like urban myth. Before I understood the nature of archetypes and inherited knowledge, that kind of stuff that's out there in the language, I was very much into urban myth. And things like the Fortean Times was my monthly sort of thing to look forward to. And one of the things about Charles Fort's work and all of the people, Harold Jon von Brunjard, I can't remember his name now, who wrote The Choking Doberman and other books, but actually great titles. The Vanishing Hitchhiker was his other one. Looked at common motifs within urban legend and how the same stories crop up all over the place. And yet people are able to reproduce the same story based on a simple idea that someone's passed to them and include key details. And so these motifs almost seem archetypal. Now that makes sense because that's how folklore works. So much of what is marketed as stories of healing and miracles within all of these complementary alternative alphabet therapies are often little more than urban folklore being reproduced in exactly the same way. As with many of these things, there are examples in the real world where it's true. The classic one, when I worked as a student nurse in Portsmouth, that went around the hospital fairly frequently, there were two. One was drug dealers giving out stickers laced with LSD outside the school gates of primary schools. That was a very popular urban myth, to the point that actually the health authority that I was working for or training in actually issued a statement to all of the staff on the pediatric departments to make them aware, to be aware that these children might inadvertently bring in these stickers when they're admitted, and they might accidentally be bringing an LSD sticker. Another child might take it, so we had to check everyone's stickers. It's an urban myth. But of course, it's not beyond the realms of possibility, like the razor blade in the apple, that someone has done that at some point. Doesn't mean it's happening everywhere. The two men scoping out the white van, scoping out dogs for abduction. Just type in white van dogs into any social media search function, especially Twitter, and look just how busy the same van with the same registration plate is all over the country, and every country has its own favoured set of photographs that do the rounds. It does happen, but it's not to say that every report coming in is actually evidence of this thing happening. There was another one that did the rounds, and for the life of me now, I can't remember what it was when I was at... Oh, yeah, this was the... Be careful when you stop in the middle of the night driving home from work. You stop because there looks like a body in the road, and you get out and it's just a pile of rags, and you get back in the car again, carry on driving. But the man with the knife is now hiding in the back seat. That did the rounds as well, and again there was a warning issued to all the staff to be aware of this as a reality. I knew it as an urban myth because I'd read that story before in Brunvard's work, and also in the Fortean Times. So these stories of healing take on the same kind of structure. They're little more than urban legend. Now, there is this notion, of course, that the unconscious mind can heal. And the unconscious mind is what makes us ill. And this is a colossally naive and ignorant understanding of how health works and how organic systems work. You see, an awful lot of disease is caused by environmental factors. Two things we know. The wealth divide, so the social inequality of health. Get the book, Social Inequalities in Health. Number one thing, your income bracket pretty much dictates which illnesses you'll get. That's so well established now worldwide. Everything from whether you've got clean water, whether you have regular dental visits, those kind of things are going to be hugely influential. But other environmental factors beyond that of the social politics will be things like toxic environments, toxic contaminants within the food, the quality of food that people get offered, and so forth. There is so much stuff that is done through environmental interaction that has got nothing to do with the unconscious mind making bad choices. There are so many disease processes that are genetic, that are simply, we know when we look at someone's lineage, you can pretty much predict what class of diseases a person is likely to die from, and at roughly what age. There are so many things that have genetic familial basis to it, and yet these things are completely ignored. The notion of these trainers, therapists, healers, and all the rest of it all seems to be they are a godlike figure. Because they speak the words, they're like Jesus. They can banish the demon, they can banish the disease. All they have to do is render the person into a trance of some description, and they speak the magic incantations like a magician, like Jesus himself, like the great people from myths and legends, and the disease is cast out. And now the person is subject to the magician's will. It's absolute nonsense. Now, I have no doubt that a lot of people make better choices when they feel better in life and they start to live different lifestyles, and a lot of people will actually get healthier. I totally get that. But that's not to say that the unconscious mind, through the power of suggestion, is able to correct endocrinological, that's a word, biological cellular malfunctions that are happening either through an endogenous process, genetic process, or environmental process. I don't believe it for 1 second. Do please give me any examples to the contrary. I would love to see it. Now, just before you do that and go, but Andy, it's been proven that when you do blah, 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 blah with people and you take certain blood tests, you can prove that certain biometric markers are improved. And therefore we can... Yeah. And does that heal cancer? Does that mean the person is cured of whatever disease process they've got? Or does it simply show that certain biometric markers can be adjusted through certain processes? Here was the argument. Years and years ago, I was on a local radio station. It didn't go very well. I was ushered out of the studio quite quickly. I think they wanted someone a little bit more grown up and mature than I was at the time. If we put people in a football match, watching their big team, where they paid like £150 for a ticket, working class sport, and their team wins, and we do biometric measurements on the majority of people that we're able to get hold of, I bet you the winning thing is going to make a difference and on what we measure. If we did the same thing on the fans of the team that loses, I think we will find the exact opposite taking place. Now, does that mean that the stadium, the football, the cheering, and all of the stuff that goes on around football is a healthy process that will cure cancer? No, it won't. Does it mean it will make them ill? Probably not. Yet, because we can measure changes, and because these things might be deemed to be positive changes, it gets overgeneralized into, we can heal cancer. Yeah. Just type in NLP cancer cure and just look at who is claiming this stuff and ask them for evidence. Ask them to show you who it is they have cured. Or maybe they'd like to have the name of somebody. Now, just before, this is what will convince me. When we also get access to the medical record of that individual. Because unless we're seeing the medical history, the biometric measurements that's taken over time, and actually what have they had done medically at the same time, then we actually have something to discuss. Until that point, all we have is urban myth.